Transmission of unknown origin.
Human.
Unknown. Can you see this?
I've never seen anything like it.
All right, and we are live. What is going on, everybody? SPC here, and welcome to the very first episode of Planet Horror. So, guys, today I've got myself a guest, my first guest of the podcast. Please welcome Antonia Carlotta.
Carlotta.
Carlotta. I was almost there. Well, welcome to the channel. Thank you so much for being my guest today. How are you doing?
I'm great. I'm really honored to be the first guest, so thank you.
Yeah. I knew I needed to reach out for you because, I mean, this is a topic I've been wanting to talk about for I don't know how long, and it's hard for some of my friends to come on here because a lot of them aren't very familiar with this, type of horror and all that stuff. So, I just knew I needed to reach out to you and I take a swing. So again, appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you allowing my extra special guest who chose this moment to join us.
Yeah, I have 5, so I had to close my office door because it would be very rambunctious in here.
When I close the door, they end up meowing and scratching at the door. So this seems like the lesser of two evils.
Oh, well, there you go. So let's let everybody know, kind of just tell us a little bit about yourself, tell us, what got you into, the Universal monsters and, just talk about you as a horror fan.
Yeah, of course. Well, my great-great-uncle Carl Laemmle started Universal Studios all the way back in 1915 out here at Universal City, where it is today. And he and his son Junior, who took over as head of production when he was 21 years old, the two of them are really responsible for making the Universal monster movies: Dracula, Frankenstein, Phantom of the Opera, The Invisible Man, The Mummy, all of those. And in addition to making the monster movies, my uncle Carl did a lot of other amazing things. He started Universal. He won a Supreme Court case against Thomas Edison. He invented the movie studio tour and kind of the concept of the movie star. He saved hundreds of Jewish refugees as Hitler was coming to power. So all of these amazing things. And the more that I learned about Uncle Carl and Junior Lemley and their accomplishments, the more that I realized that people hadn't heard about them, the more it made me want to learn and kind of share their work and their films and their legacy. So that's what really got me into it. But, that alone, though that's so much, wouldn't be enough. Like, the monster movies are just such good movies and such fun movies and so relatable in so many ways that's what, that's another part that really keeps me going.
Yeah, I just came around to the monster movies like 4 years ago. My grandfather, he showed me The Wolfman from 1941.
Yeah.
And I fell in love with it. I went out of my way to find every single movie I could find. So then I started watching, Dracula, Frankenstein, Invisible Man, Creature of the Black Lagoon, all of them. And I fell in love with this. I don't know if you want to call it a universe, I guess you could kind of call it, kind of like the MCU at this point, but it
is a universe. I know, Universal was trying to make their dark universe and really compile them together. I don't think we need all of that for it to be a universe. And, historically we have the crossover film Son of Frankenstein and Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. There are tons of crossovers that I think make it a universe. But I think it's a universe anyway, and it's all the Universal family. And I've heard so many people for whom the Wolfman was their entree into these monsters. It seems to be just a classic in that way.
It's just the atmosphere it has, like with him being in the forest and all the fog and everything. It's just, I don't know, it got to me. It was really good, but
Have you seen the new Wolfman trailer?
Oh, Yes, I remember seeing the original trailer. Oh, geez, what was that? A month or two ago. And yeah, I just watched this newest one probably like last week, and I'm interested. Lee Winnell is probably one of my favorite directors going right now. I loved his interpretation of the Invisible Man, and obviously
Hmm.
I know him best from Saw. I mean, that's how I know him as Adam. So, but I don't know. I'm hoping it's going to be good. He hasn't disappointed me yet with a movie, so
That's what I'm hoping.
yeah, knock on wood. But so, and weirdly enough, I don't know. This is just kind of a weird little like tangent. I guess I'm just going to go on, but my actual introduction to the monsters was actually back when I was a kid when they did like Alvin and the Chipmunks meet the Wolfman and meet Frankenstein. Like, I don't know. I fell in love with them back then, and I just kind of forgot about them. And then, obviously, watching the Wolfman for the first time, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, these seem right up my alley.
I think that those types of things, Alvin and the Chipmunks, or just last week I watched like a Bugs Bunny in Transylvania kind of cartoon. I think that those are such fun introductions to the monsters, and they are ways to sort of capture the imaginations of little kids that then can feel very connected to the monsters as they get older. I think things like that are just fantastic.
Yeah, I keep going back and forth who's actually my favorite monster. Like I love just the monster in general. I think he was fantastic, but if I had to really go like an enjoyment wise, I think I have to go with the Invisible Man.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, my favorite monster is Frankenstein, who I do just call Frankenstein most of the time. My favorite movie is The Bride of Frankenstein, but which heavily features Frankenstein.
I kind of figured because I saw the picture behind you, and I've always seen like your
Yes.
pictures on your channel of you dressed up as her, and I mean, it's
Yes,
it's
that was
it's
a
an iconic movie.
dream. I'm hoping to make my way at some point through all of the monsters and find ways to recreate those. As well as, my Aunt Carla used to be a dancer and an actress at Universal. She spoke the opening lines in Dracula. She was the prima ballerina in Phantom of the Opera. I would love to recreate a lot of her old photo shoots, and do my own versions of them.
Would be cool. I guess. Have you ever thought about like, I guess figuratively say like if they were gonna make a remake, I guess we'll say of like Bride of Frankenstein, like would you ever think you would want to be in that and try to be the bride maybe?
Absolutely. The barrier is not me. The barrier to entry is universal and whoever's doing their casting. But I would love to find ways to be in these films. I don't even need to be the bride. I don't need to be, the lead. I'll be the coffee maker in one scene, when they're having their whatever character building at the Starbucks or something. Like I'll take a one-line cameo and be thrilled about it.
Fair enough.
This is
So
my
I
note to all
guess
of you in casting.
there you go. So I guess for one of my other I guess questions, since obviously you've talked a lot about your uncle Carl a lot. Obviously, he's been gone for many years. How has he like influenced you just as a person, like with your love of horror?
I mean, yes, my love of horror is one big way that obviously he influenced me, and especially Junior as well. Junior has talked about how he really started to get into the dark and the macabre when he was about 11 years old. And the author Julian Stone, I think, really intelligently made the connection that that's the time that Junior's mom died, and that must have been this really, he was really close to his mom. It must have been this real reckoning with mortality and life and death, and that was, I think, what led to his exploration of all of those themes through his horror films. So that's of course one way that then I think that's trickled down to me, but there are so many other just great things that Uncle Carl and that Junior did in their life, and so many things that they did while managing to be really good people. I Thomas Edison and the trust. I talked about saving, the Jewish refugees. And they did all of these things, and they did all of these amazing business things and all of these amazing films. And what I find so inspiring is that they did them all while being like good people and nice people, while always trying to sort of fight the good fight or the right fight. They weren't afraid to be, the David versus Goliath. And from almost everything that I find, like, nobody ever had a bad word to say, especially about Uncle Carl. No one ever like said, oh, he was mean or bad or did this terrible thing. Like, I have been searching for those stories and I can't find them. So those are the things that I think influence me as I move through life, not just how can I accomplish things or make movies or carry on their legacy or whatever it is, but like, how can I do that while being a good person?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely seems like it. You're obviously, on all your videos, you're very friendly. You're very, very informative on a lot of stuff too. Like, I know you just put out a video here a few weeks ago, you visiting the cemetery, and I mean, that was just cool getting to see some of the names you showed, and just also sad because it's like, it's crazy how movies 100 years ago, especially horror, can be better and more effective than like the things we get nowadays. Like,
Yeah, it's it's tough. I understand that, studios have to do what makes money, and I'd be lying if I said that Carl himself a lot of times wasn't trying to do what makes money, right? That's what keeps a business going. But it does sometimes feel these days like we're like it's only about money, right? Somebody ran the numbers, they did the algorithm, and we're getting what it spit out versus the true heart of somebody. So you're right. And those, classic monster movies, they really have this way of they are relatable, right? I know that they're all different types of creatures, whether supernatural or real or whatever, but it's they all have this piece about like if you've ever felt different, if you've ever been trying to fit in or find your people or just been the outcast or felt mad with power or any of these things, like we've all been there in those spots and we've all felt those feelings. And that's, I think, something that makes the monsters so enduring now, and how somebody who's never seen them before can watch them and see a little piece of themselves in them.
yeah, even lately over the last few years, I've been slowly showing my nieces because I have one. She's 6, and she's like slowly kind of getting into horror. So like she can hear like a horror theme, and she'll know who it is, or she'll come talk to me about somebody, and I'm like, well, first of all, you're way too young for horror nowadays, but like showing her these classic monster movies, she's just kind of slowly dipping her feet into it and really starting to come around to it. And that's just another thing. Like, these monster movies can be for like any age. They can sit down and watch these and not feel so scared, like watching something like Frankenstein compared to like watching, like, I guess for me, like a Michael Myers film.
Totally. I don't have to worry if the kids are over my shoulder while I'm working on any of my videos or watching anything. And they do get so excited by seeing them. And they get really excited now that they know the monsters. When they see them out in the world, they get so excited. Whether we're at Target and they see a shirt with a monster on it, or I don't know, a coffee shop and it's on a mug, we stumble upon creatures of all sorts in the most random places, and they get stoked every time.
That's awesome. That's
Mhm.
that's just
It
that's
gives
just
me yeah, it gives me real hope for, like, the future generations, and that this is it's gonna continue and it's gonna live on.
and again, just even 100 years ago and like till now, like they're still like influential and still out there in the horror. I mean, again, we're getting the Wolfman here in January. Even later on this year, we're getting Nosferatu, which
Yes.
I'm excited. I just watched the original one for the first time like 3-4 weeks ago. Should have watched that so much sooner.
It's great. It's a masterclass in German expressionism. One of my upcoming videos is sort of all about German expressionism, how it helped shape the Universal monsters. And of course, Nosferatu isn't exactly one, but it kind of is. It's around the time, so it gets a mention in there.
Sweet. And I also watched the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari too for the first time.
Yes.
That one, it was so good, but it was so weird once in a while. I was
Yeah.
okay.
Yes, and Conrad Veidt from there, he ended up going. He worked for Universal. He made The Man Who Laughs. He was actually one of the earlier choices for Dracula before Bela Lugosi got the role. But so when Universal was going to make Dracula, Bela Lugosi had originated the role on stage, so he was the first one. He had all of this experience, and he wanted to play it in the movie. And Universal just didn't think he was a big enough name. And I think Bela himself sort of laughed, like he got the role after everybody else had a chance to get the role. So I think there's an actor, Ian Keith, that Universal was looking at. They had originally wanted Lon Chaney, who had done, The Phantom and The Hunchback. He passed away before Dracula started filming. And then Conrad Veidt was in the running as well. But Bela Lugosi, of course, ultimately landed the role.
He was also supposed to be Frankenstein too, right?
Yes. And that's, I don't know if you've read the book It's Alive by Julian David Stone, but he covers the months leading up to Frankenstein when it was going back and forth about who was going to play the starring role. And there's different rumors as to what happened and why. Some people say that Bela Lugosi didn't like that the monster's face was covered. He really didn't have very many lines. So he sort of thought that that was an insult to the star that he felt like he was becoming. On the other side, people just think maybe Bela Lugosi got pushed aside for no reason. But in the months leading up to Frankenstein starting to film, there are different newspaper articles that go back and forth saying Boris Karloff as the monster, Bela Lugosi as the monster, Boris Karloff, and back and forth until the end.
Boris Karloff was a perfect pick for the monster.
Absolutely. I pretty much can't envision it at this point with Bela Lugosi. I understand that he ultimately played the monster, but even at that point, he was now playing a monster that Boris Karloff had created.
Those are some big shoes to fill. I really don't think anybody. I mean, not that they were terrible performances or anything, but you can't match Boris Karloff. Even to for me, The Mummy, watching Lon Chaney Jr. play the Mummy. I mean, wasn't big on the makeup. To me, it looked like somebody just rolled him in toilet paper and threw him in the mud for 5 minutes. That's kind of the best way I can word it. But growing up, I was a huge fan of the Brendan Fraser Mummy. So I had no idea there was an original till I started watching these, and that one is so underrated. Nobody talks about the Mummy at all.
You mean the Brendan Fraser Mummy or the original Mummy?
The original from 1932.
Oh, yes.
Is it?
Yes. I was going to say the Brendan Fraser Mummy, I do feel like gets a lot of love and attention, and I appreciate it because it does bring people sometimes back to those historic monsters. I only in the last maybe 10 years have started watching that newer Mummy, and I enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. The 1932 Mummy, so much fun, and it is really underrated. Boris Karloff, I think, does a really cool job. It's interesting because he's playing this sort of reincarnated version of himself. What is it, Ardith Bay? And Zeta Johann in that film is so just mesmerizing and beautiful. So I think it's a really good film. Maybe a little, I was going to say a little slower, but I think Dracula has that slow sense to it too, and people love that. So I'm not sure why it gets as overlooked.
You'd think you'd see the name Boris Karloff, and that'd be you would just go and just pick that right away. I have no problems with Lon Chaney Jr. I like him a lot as the Wolfman. I mean, he's the only person who's ever played the Wolfman, so really he's the only actor to actually consistently play one role in this universe, which is cool. But because
I think I actually realized that before. But yeah, you're totally right.
I think that's why he's my favorite monster, is because it's one guy plays it the whole time. Yeah, so it feels a full story till he's finally, I guess, jumps to his end trying to capture Dracula. But I don't know. I feel kind of bad saying this, but like the last time I watched the original Dracula, I don't know why. To me, it kind of felt like an unintentional comedy to me.
I will say, so I mean, for sure, I've seen it on like in a theater before, but I just watched it last weekend in a theater. It's rare that I get the opportunity to see it on a big screen, and there were like quite a few moments that the whole audience was laughing. It was kind of comedic, and it's funny because yeah, it got me sort of wondering, like, was that intentional on Todd Browning's part? Of course, we always talk about James Whale and how he infuses so much comedy into his films, but we never talk about that with Dracula. We tend to talk about how it is a little slower, more wooden. It's shot like a play. It can be, I don't want to call it drier, but it can be drier. There's a thousand things to love about Dracula, and I do, but we don't talk about those comedic moments, and I felt like I was seeing so many more of them when I got the opportunity to see it on a big screen.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a lot different watching it on the big screen.
Yeah, I mean, things are just they're just bigger. It's more clear and more apparent. I think noticing so many differences on the big screen, it just made me really want to see more films because I'm so used to honestly watching like really grainy, bad versions of movies on my laptop. I'll like, I don't know, go to archive.org or just illegal sites, don't tell on me, so that I can watch these old movies that I can't find anywhere else. So to see a good quality version on a big screen with an audience as it was originally intended, it feels like a different experience every time.
That's how I felt here recently because for getting ready for Halloween, they re-released a bunch of old horror movies in our theater. So I went and I saw the 1960s Psycho in the big screen for the first
Oh
time. That
yeah.
was a whole theater to myself, reclining chairs. It was an amazing experience by myself. But I feel like that's how you need to really appreciate films. Like I don't think you can just hop on YouTube or go on to Netflix and watch these movies. You're not going to get the same experience that you get watching these on the big screen.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that to me was a bit of a nitpick, I guess, during the whole quarantine situation. Movies coming to streaming instead of the theaters.
At the time, I think I really appreciated it because one, it showed agility on the parts of the studios to try something new, and we weren't able to go to theaters. So I appreciated having films quicker and for them to experiment with that. Um, I go back and forth. I think theaters are a really important experience for watching movies, and I do think that that's the best way to see a film. But not everyone can go to the movies and has that luxury and has the time and has the money, and it can, especially in these days, become such an expensive endeavor that I do think it's reasonable for people to have options about how they watch films because I'd rather somebody see a movie at all or watch it at home or however it is than not see it at all. I think it's sort of incumbent upon both the studios and the theaters to figure out, well, how do we actually get people, like, how do we make sure that they see the value add in going to a theater? We can't just like withhold films or make the window longer or something to like threaten them into it. That's not going to make a good experience. You got to make it worth their while.
Yeah, because I mean that's how I watched Nosferatu. I watched that just on my phone in the middle of the night, just because I found it on YouTube. But I felt like I just didn't get the same experience watching it on, I guess, a bigger screen, just like my
Mhm.
television. But I would love to watch all the classic monster movies on the big screen someday. That's just it's a goal. It's a goal in life.
Can I ask what city you're in or what state you're in?
I live in lovely North Dakota.
North Dakota. Oh, so you you probably don't have a ton of theatrical options to see films like this, huh? Or do
No,
you? No.
we well every month we have what's called flashback cinema. So like they'll just take a bunch of random movies. So like the last couple weeks, they've done like Psycho, The Shining, The Lost Boys. I don't know why they picked the last two Twilight movies. So, but yeah, we
Were
don't
they
get a lot
popular?
of. They must have been. I mean, like one of my goals is to go see The Shining in theaters because it's my favorite horror movie of all time, and same thing
Mm.
too with going to see something like Halloween because like those are my two favorites right now because I mean obviously too if you can't tell I'm a huge Star Wars guy, so I mean besides
I
horror
can.
it's my franchise, but Michael Myers is my guy. Halloween's my favorite horror franchise of all time, so I mean it's hard not to talk about it when it comes to watching and talking to horror all the time, but monsters. We're here to talk about the monsters, how influential they are.
Monsters.
Yes.
I can't say much to Star Wars, so you're gonna
It's
lose me
okay.
there. I've seen episode 4, which I think is the first one, right?
Yep.
And I saw one in theaters like 6 years ago. That's all I've got.
Okay. Okay. Well, Star Wars isn't for everybody, and trust me, I know it's. I can also say our fan base is a little questionable at times, which is something I'm not proud of, but that's a whole nother story here and there. But so I guess in terms of like, how would you rank the classic monsters if you had to go from? I don't want to say worst because they're all pretty good monsters, but least to
And I
best.
want to confirm the monster or the movie.
Let's do the monsters first.
Okay. So, top monster, Frankenstein, the monster,
Yep.
Frankenstein's monster. Then The Bride of Frankenstein.
Okay.
Then, it's probably going to end up aligning pretty well with my movies. Then Dracula. I love The Creature from the Black Lagoon. I'm going to jump all the way to the 50s here.
Oh,
I
okay.
count Creature of the Black Lagoon as one of the Universal monsters, and I love him. Um, the Wolfman has been growing on me, but I have not historically been a werewolf kind of gal. And
Okay.
then, who am I missing here? The Invisible Man. I
Yep.
like the movie, but as a monster, I'm pretty ho-hum on. The concept of an invisible man is pretty scary to me, and I kind of like the, like, existential question in the movie, like, if there were no consequences, what might you do? Or, when you play God, like, what are I don't know, what happens, which I guess is also kind of the Frankenstein question. But anyway, but the Invisible Man himself, it's maybe not my favorite monster. Did I get them all?
I think technically, unless you want to also count Phantom of the Opera, because
Phantom.
I know they
Oh
did a
yeah, the
colored
Phantom
version.
would go in at number 5, like right after the Creature, somewhere in there.
Okay.
Again, I like maybe even number 4, maybe right before the Creature. It's a really tough question, and I realized as I was going through, it's hard for me to separate the monster from the movie. But
That's fair. I was surprised by Creature of the Black Lagoon. Like I didn't know what to expect, and it was blown out of the water. It
I
was so good.
there's so much that I love about that film. And it's hard for me to put it at the top because that's one movie where clearly like my family had nothing to do with making it. There's not really a clear, through line from the Lemley era at Universal. So it very much sits in its, own era. But, like, aesthetically, I love the sort of contrast between the, like, lush tropical Amazonian setting with the, like, horror that's lurking beneath the surface. I love the actual monster. I love the story behind, Millicent Patrick, who made the costume and, got sort of pushed aside by Bud Westmore. That's another good book worth reading, is Lady from the Black Lagoon by Mallory O'Meara. But anyway, I love all of that. I think the movie is really good. And it had like a clear influence on so many of the modern sort of water-based horror films. So especially movies like Jaws, you can see shots that are so similar between the two films. And I don't think that Jaws would be what it is today if the creature didn't get there first.
I'm confused because I know there's a movie called like I think it's the Lady in no, not the Lady in the Water, The Shape of Water. Some people are like saying
Yes.
that's like a remake of Creature in a way.
Sort of. It's like a reimagining of it. So it kind of asks the question of like what would happen if the creature and Juliet Adams' character, what would happen if they got together? So it's not exactly the same, but it is based off of that idea. And
Oh,
it is, I mean,
okay.
I think that's really good. That movie as well, it does something that I really love in a lot of like these horror remakes, which it's not just remaking the film, but it had this really unique aesthetic identity. It made really bold choices. Again, it's like asking this other question and kind of shooting off in its own lane. So I watched that movie again recently. It just like blew me away.
I've never seen it. I always hear that that's what it is. It's like a remake or a retelling, reimagining of The Creature in the Black Lagoon. I was like, oh, okay. I mean, maybe someday I'll check it out because I mean I've seen remakes of these other monsters. I've seen the Bram Stoker version of Dracula from the it's early mid '90s with like Keanu Reeves and Gary Oldman and all them. And I know I've seen the Frankenstein remake once with Robert De Niro. I don't remember it very much. I just remember it being kind of weird for me because, like, obviously as a kid, you picture the Frankenstein monster, the
Uh-huh.
bolts, and the green, and everything, and you see a more human-looking version. You're kind of like, okay, this is weird for me, but I can kind of get over it.
There are quite a few of these remakes that I haven't actually seen. So I haven't seen that Robert De Niro Frankenstein. I haven't seen Bram Stoker's Dracula. Those are movies I think I'm slowly starting to make my way through now. Some of them I like more than others. Like I did watch, I think it was I Frankenstein 2 years ago. It was okay. Um, I try to watch some. I've seen the 1943 Phantom of the Opera. I think that's the color one that you were referring to earlier. I actually just watched that again maybe 2 days ago because I'm editing a video about Claude Rains right now, and he plays the Phantom in that film. And I mean, it's a good movie. The music is good. The sets are really beautiful. But, that's one where I feel like they for the most part, just remade the movie, and they didn't necessarily have a new or different vision that separated it enough from the original to then make me wanna watch that one more.
Yeah, I need to give that one a rewatch because earlier this year I started watching like silent horror, so that's when I started getting into Phantom, Nosferatu, Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, and
Have
I
you
remember
seen The Cat and the Canary?
I have not.
The Cat and the Canary is really, really good. I recommend it.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of those classic movies I need to see still, and one I think I don't know, it might arguably, in my opinion, be James Whale's best movie, but the Old Dark House.
Yes, really good.
Oh,
Really,
that
really good.
was
Again, really funny and unique and really great characters.
yeah, another good Boris Karloff movie where he's not really a
Mhm.
creature, but he's not really like the threat in a weird way.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and that movie I think is sort of the prototype for all the kind of old dark house movies that came after it. I think it is more influential than people realize or people would know, right? Most people haven't heard of that film, but most people have seen films that are in some way or another modeled after that film.
Hmm. Yeah, that is for sure. But I need to give Phantom of the Opera another chance because now that I really like Nosferatu and geez, I just said it, the Dr. Caligari.
Cognitive, yeah.
Yeah. And I did watch The Man Who Laughs too. That was wow.
Oh yeah.
That was good. That was good. But
That's a great. I've made a video that's all about Conrad Veidt and his life, but I haven't done one yet specifically about the man who laughs. So I think that's going to be one of my upcoming episodes.
keep my eye out for that one. Now that wow, that was a very powerful movie to me.
Hmm. And that's Mary Philbin, who was in Phantom of the Opera,
Oh,
which
okay.
this is unrelated to everything. But the Phantom of the Opera, one of the things that I love most about that movie is just what a disaster the making of Phantom of the Opera was. Behind the scenes, everybody was like fighting with everybody. Nobody liked Rupert Julian. Um, a bunch of different directors had to come in and direct different scenes because people weren't doing well working together. So my uncle Ernst even came in, directed a couple scenes. Um, I almost want to say Lois Weber came in and like directed a couple scenes. Like it was very all over the place. There's also a scene in the movie where Norman Carey is acting with Mary Philbin and he's feeling her up on camera and you can see her physically move his hand away from her. It's for the classic that that movie has become and for how much it endured the time. It's wild just how messy everything was making it.
Interesting.
Hmm. Yeah, you'd never
Because
know.
no, but no. Earlier this year, I watched that. I want to say it was like January or February, and I don't know if you use it. I use this app called Letterbox. So like it's you do a bunch of ratings of movies and give your little minor review for movies. And I gave the original Phantom of the Opera a 2.5 out of 5. But
Well, out of five. Okay, I thought it was. I don't use Letterboxd. I know it. I
okay,
thought it was going to be out of 10.
no. It was still good. It was awesome to see that iconic unmasking scene, which obviously horror knowledge at this point in time. But I need to
Hmm.
give it a rewatch and see if I can really appreciate it now after watching the other two.
Yeah, I also got to go. I was in Paris earlier this year, so I got to go see the actual
Oh,
Paris Opera House, and that was really neat. And I have a picture of Carl Laemmle and Gaston Leroux standing outside the Paris Opera House. So it was cool, kind of looking for like, oh, what's the spot that they were standing where they took that picture. And the original, the stage 28 that Phantom had been filmed on, was still standing on the Universal lot with the Paris Opera House set in it all the way up until 2014. So I actually got to visit that set a couple times, including once with my aunt Carla, who had like danced there for back in 1925 for this film. So that was really cool.
yes.
Then they knocked it down, I think, for maybe Harry Potter World or Super Mario, one of those.
Seriously.
Yeah, they do say that the Phantom, like that the Paris Opera House set is still somewhere in storage, and they're just looking for someone to take it. So I really, really, really hope that that's the case. But the sound stage is not there anymore.
Oh, okay. Now, is it the same set where they did the remake of Phantom of the Opera, or is that a completely different set?
Great question. I don't know. I'm like trying to think now because, like I said, I just rewatched the film. I probably should have looked to see if it looked exactly the same, or I'm not positive.
Hmm, okay. Well, yeah, it's, something I'll have to look up here at some point.
I know that they filmed a Muppets movie on that stage. I know they filmed. I used to have a whole list of things that they filmed, but I know the Muppets filmed there.
Hmm. Wow, the Muppets
Hmm.
filmed on the same stage. That's wow, that's pretty wild.
That's how I mean, it's so funny or so interesting to think about how many different sets have been, within four walls. Like the stage where Dracula and Frankenstein filmed, I'm like 99% sure that that's where the voice is now. and just how many iterations of shows did that go through till we got to where it is today, and all the history that one building has seen.
It's crazy. So now, I guess for a question for you about your Uncle Carl. So, did he lost the rights for Universal? Is that correct?
So, sort of. Um, he, I'll rewind a little bit and say that when Uncle Carl was really running Universal, when he was like the number one in charge, his kind of ethos was about making as many movies as possible on a smaller budget each year. And his goal was really to make all movies like have a universal audience, hence the name. So that was kind of the way he ran things. Junior Lemley got control of Universal as a 21st birthday present. His dad made him head of production. A little bit, it was just nepotism, right? A father giving his son the business, but also Junior had grown up on the Universal backlot. He knew the business inside and out, and he kind of had the benefit of youth and being kind of young and cool on his side to know what movies to make. But a big change that Junior wanted to make was making fewer movies every year on a much bigger budget, which kind of meant higher risk, higher reward. When movies did well, they did so well. When movies didn't do well, it put the studio in like a much more precarious position. So in 1936, they were working on the movie Showboat, which was a big musical. It was directed by James Whale, the same one that did Frankenstein and The Bride of Frankenstein and The Old Dark House. So just very cool for him that he had such range to the movies that he made. So he's making Showboat. Universal had just finished working on Sutter's Gold and Magnificent Obsession, which were two other really big budget films. I can't quite remember if they just hadn't come out yet or if they didn't do well, but Universal was running out of money to put into Showboat. So they decided to take out their very first loan for Universal and they put the studio up as collateral. And it was a little bit of a gamble because they thought that they were going to be able to get the movie out on time and pay back the loan. But they also didn't really think that the bank was going to want to buy the studio or to pay them out if they didn't get Showboat on time. So they kind of thought they were okay either way. But either way, Showboat continued to go over time and over schedule, and the bank did make good on the loan and wanted to buy them out. And that was that basically. That was how my family lost Universal. And like kind of the kicker, the tough part is that when Showboat came out, it was Universal's like one of their most successful films to date. They were really right to believe in Showboat and to like put everything they had into it. They just didn't have the time to see it through.
Sad.
Yeah.
It's
It's sad for me today because I don't own a movie studio.
I mean, I would be pretty jealous. I mean, I could about just imagine like what you would experience backstage with Universal. Like to me, they've made some of like my favorite movies of all time. Like my favorite movie of all time is the original Jurassic Park. Like that's probably my favorite movie from them, if I have to be honest.
It's a great one. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they've had this sounds so like quaint to say, but like, yeah, they've had so many good movies over the years beyond the Universal Monsters, Jurassic Park and Jaws and Back to the Future. And, even sort of in modern days, like I thought Bridesmaids was a really good movie. That was Universal. Like they have such, I guess, range to the movies that they did. I thought it was also really impressive. Like just last year, they made more than any other studio between what was theirs? Oppenheimer was theirs, the Super Mario's brothers. Like they are still doing really well. But yeah, I guess I don't know. I took us a little off course, but yes, over the years they've made so many good movies.
Yeah, even one I kind of slightly brought up for a little while. They were working with Blumhouse, and they were working on the newest Halloween trilogy, which that was pretty impressive to see. Like I love that first Halloween 2018. That was so good.
I love their partnership with Blumhouse. I think that's been, I guess, really good for everyone. I'm also like, I am a big fan of Lee Winnell, as we talked about earlier, and James Wan, who's going to be doing the new Creature from the Black Lagoon remake. So I think I appreciate, I guess, through Blumhouse specifically, that they're able to do these sort of smaller indie horror films that really like scratch that itch that I have to watch those. And so many of those end up being slightly comedic as well, which just really speaks to me. I think
Okay.
those James Whale movies that infuse horror and comedy so well. I think I'm always looking for that in my modern horror films as well, but be it Abigail or Lisa Frankenstein or Megan, right? All of those types of
Yep.
movies.
Yeah. Yeah, those are pretty good choices. Even though I know I don't think I'm pretty sure it's not Universal, but like, I guess in a way, one of my favorite parodies of a monster movie is Young Frankenstein from Mel
Oh
Brooks.
yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
I don't know if I don't think that's Universal. But you're right, it's so good. I remember as a kid loving that movie, and I didn't understand, three-quarters of the jokes in it, but I could just tell that it was funny, and I thought it was so funny. So yeah, it's
yeah,
a classic.
yeah. Now that I've watched the original three Frankenstein movies, like so many more of the jokes like are landing for me. Like at the end where uh, Frankenstein's wife, her hair looks like the bride's, and obviously where they get a lot of I guess kind of the template of the story is basically Son of Frankenstein.
Hmm.
And yeah, another one my grandfather showed me. That's probably the probably the first movie I think he ever showed me, and I fell in love with it. It's a yearly watch. It's in my top 10 favorite movies of all time. It's such a classic.
It's such a good way to be introduced to a movie, especially a movie like that. But to have somebody, like your family introduce you is cool.
Yeah, yeah, he is a gigantic fan of those monster movies. Like after we got done watching the original Wolfman, he was telling me a whole bunch about like him growing up and actually going to the theater to go and see a couple of these movies while he was younger. And I was like, you're
So he
so
must
right.
be really proud of what you're doing right here then.
Oh yeah, yeah. He definitely likes I come on here and share my love of horror and stuff. And even was it last year? Every year becomes more of a blur. It was like a year or so ago. I actually did a live watch along for Young Frankenstein because I had one of my buddies who's never watched it before. And I know he was in the chat. He was sitting there chatting with us, talking about the whole movie the whole time. It's so fun.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And maybe even unpopular opinion, maybe my favorite interpretation of Frankenstein is from Peter Boyle.
I probably haven't seen that one.
He plays the Frankenstein in Young Frankenstein.
Oh, then I have. Sorry, I guess I didn't know.
Oh no, you are good. Didn't mean to confuse you.
No, that's all right.
So, and I guess what do you think really makes the monsters stand the test of time? Because I mean, like back then in the 30s all the way to the 50s, we had those monsters. Nowadays we have Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, Freddy Krueger, all these other iconic, I guess now slasher villains. But what do you think makes the classic monsters still stand the test of time?
One thing that I really love about the Universal monsters, more than perhaps some of the modern monsters that we get, is that there's really something they're not actually, for the most part, out to be evil or out to be villains. Like, they didn't, for the most part, wake up and just say like, I want to kill today for no reason. A lot of times they're misunderstood, and there's something really sympathetic about them, and that makes them really relatable, right? Instead of hating them or being scared of them in that way, it's like you almost connect to them. And I think that really helps us then want to I don't know, just carry those creatures with us. So I think that that's a big part of it. And I think the movies tend to have kinda, they're not like a PSA, like blatant in your face message, but they all kind of have a message to them or an existential question that I think resonates with us, whether that's about, feeling like you belong, whether that is, um, I don't know, longing for a different time or a different place or just feeling so lost, right? All of these things are these universal emotions that almost everybody has at some point or another, and I think that's what makes them so timeless.
I do definitely agree with the sympathetic part because, like, especially in Bride of Frankenstein, like I have such pity for the monster through that whole movie. I'm like, oh,
Mhm.
you poor guy. Like, oh, I want to help you.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And, Lon Chaney Jr. in The Wolfman, like well, first off, the behind the scenes story of that, I think it was Kurt Siodmak who wrote that. He had to flee his home of Germany. I think he went first to like the UK, then the US. And so when he was writing The Wolfman, he was writing it about somebody who was sort of plagued with this curse that he didn't want, right? He didn't ask for it, it was sort of put upon him, and so I think that comes through in those kinds of stories.
Yeah, for sure. And so I guess for my final question, out of all of the monsters, who would you say is legitimately the scariest? Like, who could you see following you into your nightmares?
Um, okay, that's a really good question. I think I'm gonna go with Dracula because there's less overtly in his case to be, let's say, to feel sympathetic about. He is this supernatural creature. He is very scary, but he's charming and he is elegant and he's handsome. And so he will like lure me in or lure one in and then attack. And I think that that makes him scarier than some of the others. And
Okay.
you?
The Invisible Man.
He's
That's
certainly the deadliest. The kill count in The Invisible Man is higher than I think any other Universal monster film.
yeah, especially just for one scene, which is crazy
Yeah.
to think about. I think I pick him though mostly because of the 2020 Invisible Man, because like just they can frame you, make you look like you're going nuts or like you're actually the one doing the killing. Like that's scary to think about.
Absolutely. And I think the modern Invisible Man, I think one of the reasons that for the most part it seems like people really liked the movie and that people really it seemed to resonate, and I think it's gonna have some lasting power, and I think it's another example of the film, again, not just being, let's say, a cash grab or something really shallow. It's obviously he's not a sympathetic monster, but I think it had a really clear message to it. So that one was sort of a message about domestic violence and how insidious it can be and how it can lead people to feel like they're going crazy, and they turned this very real issue and made it this entertaining but real movie, right? This movie that people can connect to and find something in and feel like they in some way big or small have experienced something like that before. So I think that was a really great example of taking kind of the heart of the original Universal monsters and carrying that forward and making a movie that's good.
Yeah, I really hope they go through and they do more of these monsters because I mean, especially to see how the Wolfman ends up doing. I hope maybe just give them all the Lee Winnell if he does good with the Wolfman. Like
I
I would
know.
love to see a Frankenstein from him.
I'm a little Nervous. The biggest thing that makes me nervous about the new Wolfman is that they put it in January, which historically is like not a good time for movies. And so I'm wondering like why do they not have faith in it, or do they really think it's going to defy the odds there? But like Lee Wanell does not let me down. I too love Saw. I too love The Invisible Man. So I hope I'm going to love The Wolfman. And then the same thing with James Wan. Atomic Monster, and all of their films I think are really entertaining and interesting. For some reason, Malignant's the only one coming to mind right now, but all of his films, and so I'm optimistic for what I think he could do with the creature. I think
Yeah.
I hope that they keep them as kind of sympathetic creatures. I hope they keep that heart and it doesn't just become like a CGI crazed monster for no reason.
Oh, I hope not. I always preach practical over digital all the
Mhm.
time. That's just a big thing for me. So, all right. Well, that is going to do it for episode 1 of Planet Horror. I want to thank Antonia for stopping by. Please tell the people where they can find you and what you got coming up.
Yeah, you can find me on Universally Me, which is it's actually my name, youtube.com/Antonia Carlotta. It is the place for videos about all things Universal and classic horror and new horror, a little bit of everything. And also, if you happen to be in the LA area, I'm going to be live a couple times this weekend. So tomorrow, I'm going to be at the Gardena Cinema doing an interview between Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein, but they're doing a whole Universal Monster Marathon all weekend. And Sunday, I will be introducing Phantom of the Opera 2 times at the Old Town Music Hall in El Segundo. I'll be there at the 2:30 and the 7 o'clock showing.
All right, sweet.
Thank
Well,
you so
all right.
much.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on. And with that being said, you guys, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you in the next one.